Joining me now is Republican Congressman Will Hurd. He serves on the Intelligence Committee and is a former CIA officer. Congressman, thank you very much for being with us. In addition to that reporting, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien just spoke to the press, and he was talking about the administration claims that there was an imminent threat posed by General Sulemani, that killing him thwarted an imminent attack. He claimed that there is strong evidence and strong intelligence that Sulemani was plotting to kill, to attack American facilities and diplomats, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who were located at certain facilities. My question to you, as a member of the Intelligence Committee, have you seen evidence yet that there was a specific plan to hit a specific target? Because General Sulemani, you know, he had discussions about those things on days that end with Y. I mean, every day General Sulemani talked about killing Americans. The question is, was there a specific attack that was thwarted by killing him?
Well, John, it's a good question, and I just got back to Washington, D.C., so I haven't been into the secure spaces to read some of the intelligence, but whether or not it was imminent, we know there's been a general threat. We know that the Iranians have been trying to kill Americans for 41 years. So this is not something that is new. And why were we seeing an increase in Iranian activity in Iraq specifically? We have to remember that the Iraqi prime minister is in essence an Iranian puppet, which has fomented discord within Iraq. And you've had a lot of Iraqis protesting, which is why the Iraqi prime minister said he was going to step down and be a caretaker prime minister until parliament can decide when next elections are. The Iranians were losing a foothold in Iraq. They were using their proxies, these Shia militia groups, in order to infiltrate some of these people that were protesting. So we know that the Iranians were afraid of what was happening. And so whether it was an imminent threat, we know that there's a general threat. Qasem Soleimani was the head of the top terrorist organization in the world. And you can't hide behind a uniform of your government to prevent you from being called a terrorist. You're still a terrorist. And he was in Iraq, not because he was transiting the Baghdad airport. He was in Iraq because he was working with their proxies to increase attacks on the U.S., on our allies, and him being off the battlefield is a good thing.
As a legal matter, it might matter if there was a specific threat that he was involved in. And then there's the question, and we've heard from several members of Congress over the last few days, does killing Suleimani make Americans safer? I've heard you say yes. You say it's a positive thing to take him off the battlefield. But if you look at the response just the last few days, what's happened over the last few days, it seems that Iranian public opinion, which had been fractious, is now galvanized in support of the regime. You've had Iraq vote to remove U.S. troops from that country. You've had the United States have to suspend activities against ISIS. Those three things.
Sure.
Does that make the U.S. safer?
Well, what would make the U.S. safer is if the Iranian government stopped killing Americans, stopped killing our allies, stopped lying about their nuclear program, stopped killing their own people. I'm saying that there was a galvanization of Iranian support at the death of Suleimani. They just had protests in November where the government killed unarmed of their own folks, right? The Iraqi parliament, this was barely it was a resolution, not binding legislation. They barely had a quorum because almost half of the Iraqi parliament decided not to go there because they were protesting what this Iranian-backed caretaker prime minister was trying to do. And so saying that we have to understand the nuance of what's happening in Iraq in order to understand these larger things. So this is about, if the Iranians want to become part of the world community again, they know what they need to do. Iran is not the victim in this situation.
But can I ask you?
They are the culprits.
But can I ask you, and I hear what you're saying, and I've heard this argument, does killing General Suleimani make them becoming part of the world community more likely?
So here's what we do know. The Army War College did a review of the Iraq War. I believe this was the end of 2018, maybe the beginning of 2019. And here's what they found. When the Iranians suffered no consequences, they increased their level of activity in Iraq. When they saw consequences, their assets being killed, their folks being arrested, they curbed and curtailed some of their operations. When you do not, when there is absolutely no consequence to your behavior, you're going to continue doing it. One thing I do know now, the new head of the Quds Force is looking over his shoulder. The other members of the Iranian military are looking at, hey, this is a new calculation that we have to think about, right? And so again, this is the Iranians' decision to change this. And what's frustrating to me is a lot of folks in Western media is portraying this like Iran is a victim. They're not. They have been doing this for 40 years. And so when we portray them as a victim, we are playing into their hands and allowing them to have a covert action activity.